Hey, One Digital, this is Travis Dommert, and I want to introduce you to the Habits Challenge. The idea here is how do we leverage insights from elite soldiers and athletes to do more of our best work and best lives? I have had the pleasure of working in this space for a number of years. So while it didn't really come up in the consulting or staffing work I did have 5 years in a startup where I worked with sales and leadership teams on how do we elevate performance. And the key insight there was, wow, if you want to elevate the results, you have to elevate and increase the frequency and effectiveness of the things you do that lead to results. In other words, what are the habits and rituals of high-performing salespeople and high-performing leaders? This led down an unexpected road of studying soldiers and athletes. And so a big part of this insight is how do we consistently do hard things when most people can't? Before we dive in too far, I think it's really important to just check in on where you are. So if you would pause the video, go through and score yourself on this 10-question assessment. This is part of a much broader assessment, but it's a good sampling. For each one of these, just rate yourself from 1 to 10. 1 would be I never do this. 10 would be I consistently always do this. And then add up your scores. So ideally, if you were nailing all of it, you would have 100, but just kind of see where you are and don't be surprised if your score is perhaps less than 70 or 80. In fact, a 70 to 80 is actually a very solid score. Do that first, would you? Okay, I'm going to keep moving and I'm going to assume that you did. So pause and do that, and let's keep rolling. What the key insight is here is if your score is below 50, what it says is you are not on a path to really achieving your full potential. If you're 50 to 60, you are probably struggling to keep your head above water, do the right things to bring your full best self to your work and to your life. It's really not until we get above 70 that we start to experience thriving. It is rare that I find anybody who's operating above the 80 to 90 level, but I really believe it's possible. All these things are relatively easy. They're relatively simple. What's hard is doing them on a consistent basis. The truth is, based on the things going on in our lives, there has never been a harder time to be in the workforce. It is crazy busy. But I also want to face another truth. There has never been a better time to be in the workforce. We do have tools and resources and flexibility like we've never had before. We have access to information and growth opportunities. It's figuring out how do we manage those? How do we navigate them in a way that doesn't wear us out? Now, if we were to look online, one of the things you can also get glimpses of is secrets to success. They're out there. And if we wanted to be a little more like Elon Musk or someone like Will Smith, well, you'd say, okay, great. What are the secrets? And you'll find them, at least according to them. One of the challenges is not all these things are actionable. Not all of them are the kind of things that you could actually put into your life, keep into your life, and consistently do. And when you try to tackle things that are not actionable, well, you can get stuck. That's why I like to go back to a little more timeless advice. It's credited to Aristotle. Whether or not he said it, we don't know. But this phrase that we are what we repeatedly do, excellence is not an act, but a habit, is profound. What it says is we're going to connect our doing to our state of being. If you are not living your best life, doing your best work, if you are not the person that you are meant to be, you really need to look at what are you consistently doing. If you will repeatedly do the right things, you will become whatever it is that you are trying to do, whatever you're trying to be. Those two things are connected through our habits and rituals. So the key thing is, how do I find things that are actionable and repeatable that lead me down a predictable path? Now, this is not normal. In fact, many of our common goals, things that we talk about on a regular basis or things that famous people talk about, are not translated into things we consistently do. So at work, when we talk about driving organic growth, that is really an outcome of something else. We want to delight our customers. Well, how? What is it that you do that delights customers? That advice, you should really like what you do. Well, great, but I need to do things that I like. Then I will be more likely to like what I do. Hitting your goals, largely a function of your repeatable behaviors. And then notions like don't chase money. Frankly, I'd say anytime you're using a don't, you're probably not on a full path to your potential. And one of the reasons is we're not good at not doing things. What you want to do is take anything that's aspirational, growth oriented for yourself and turn it into an actionable habit. So if we don't chase money, what we really need to do is say, what is it I am doing? Is it, practice a daily gratitude? Is it identify my purpose and tie my work to it and live out my purpose on a daily or weekly basis? What is it you are doing? That is what's going to be really more effective. The other thing to note is that the subconscious mind does not process don't. So when you tell it something like, don't do this, all it heard was, do this. Don't think about a ripe yellow banana. Well, it doesn't know how to do that. It immediately starts conjuring up images of the things that it heard. So anyway, just a little caution when you're setting out to do something, really focus on things that you can do. Now, what about you? What are the goals and the behaviors that lead toward them that are most relevant for you in your job right now? This is an activity worth doing. But if you're looking for some hints, I want to share a little story. This story is about launching a business called I Run, You Run. This was a startup of mine back in 2010 with a good dear friend. It was really his startup. I joined him to try to commercialize it. I Run, You Run was a performance and accountability app designed to help people focus in on high payoff activities and hold each other accountable for doing them. The key insight that we learned was that actions speak louder than goals. Goals weren't necessarily getting people closer to accomplishing them. It was the actions that led to them. That's where they needed to apply their focus, be a little bit more upstream. The first thing that we learned is most people don't know what to repeatedly do. In school or even at work, we're often taught, how do I get things done? Not how do I get things started and keep them alive? There is much more focus on tasks than habits or rituals. So the first thing we had to do is figure out what they were. We frankly didn't know. And so we did a study with leaders. We asked 300 leaders, what are the 5 to 7 things you need to consistently do each week? If it's not weekly, it's probably not habitual, each week or daily to be your best. Now, we expected that they would say, well, I'm going to do something to take care of the customer, something to take care of my employees. And we did find those things. Business development and professional development were 2 of the most common actions we found in our data set. However, about 30% of the things that we saw in the data set, I was consistently saying that's a miscellaneous. Miscellaneous, miscellaneous, miscellaneous. And it was often personal things. So they would mention, I need to consistently do my workout, get to bed on time, date my spouse, spend quiet time, alone with myself and my thoughts, or manage my diet, or spend time with my kids, whatever those things were. They didn't really seem connected to how do we be a better leader or how do we grow sales. So we ignored the miscellaneous bucket. About a year and a half into our work, we had an executive coach send us the article, The Making of a Corporate Athlete. And in it, sports psychologists shared how they went from working with elite athletes to working with corporate executives. And they never worked on the athlete's swing. They had always worked on their personal habits. So that's all they did with the executives. Well, it turns out when you actually get stronger personal habits, you see stronger performance. And suddenly we realized, wow, we're ignoring the things that are perhaps most important for people to consistently perform. What we called it then was an iceberg principle. What we realized is what we see at work is like the tip of an iceberg. Those are the work behaviors, and they are held up by the life behaviors. Often in the darkest places, deep down under the water, you have something going on in someone's life. And when those things go wrong, it's like a chunk of the iceberg can just break off and float away. What happens to the work? It sinks. So we knew they were very directly connected. And we started to refer to those life behaviors as capacity drivers, the work behaviors as production behaviors. 2 different types of behaviors, both critical for sustaining high performance. The takeaway here is that personal habits power professional performance. It's a lot of P's, but hopefully it makes it memorable. My personal habits, the things that I do at home, in my quiet time, on my own, that are none of your business, frankly, well, they actually show up at work. So if you want to be an effective leader, you need to care about how are your people doing? How are they taking care of themselves? Are they mentally, emotionally, spiritually fit, as well as physically strong? Are they sleeping and things like that? So really the personal habits matter very much at how we show up at work. It's just that often it's areas that we can't talk about. It's not always appropriate to ask. And so we have to think about how can we help people do better in their personal lives so they show up with the power to do great work. Ultimately, we use the analogy of a speedometer and a tachometer. And then we realize, gosh, neither one of those is really getting at what capacity really is. It's the fuel. And so as we talked about like a fuel tank and a tachometer, now I'm getting a better sense of like, how do I optimize the performance of this little race car called me? On the capacity side, I'm typically looking at what are the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and by the way, financial habits. Because I guarantee you run out of money, you are putting a lot of stress on the engine. And then at work, we referred to this acronym as growth. What are you doing to drive growth in the output that you're doing? Deepen the relationships, stay organized and focused, do your best work, whatever it is you need to do. Are you doing enough of it and turning the crank? Elevating your thinking and delivering something extra. We called it higher, like that little 1% special sauce. Is it that you send a couple of thank you notes every week? Is it that you go visit somebody? Is it just some little thing that you do that makes you extra special and stand out? That collection of habits, that is what is really going to drive results. And so also you notice here, capacity and production are on the same side of the equation. It's not work-life balance. It's actually work and life working together to deliver results. Capacity times production equals results. The main message here is if either of those goes to zero, you run out of gas, or you don't stress the engine, you don't get results. So you can have fantastic capacity. Your tank is full, you're loving life, everything's good. If you don't work hard, no results. If you don't work hard, you can be fired. But the flip side is also true. You can't kill yourself, redline the tachometer all the time, burn out all the gas, and then obviously you're going to have no results either. So how do I optimize both? So the first challenge we put up was just really simple. We'd say, could you pick at least one habit? Could you decide how many times you should do it each week for 10 weeks, and then track whether or not you did it? This is how we commonly started our challenge years ago. And then we would ask people, what percentage of the group will actually complete their habit for all 10 weeks? Now, initially we thought, okay, maybe 60 to 70%. Wrong. Turns out to be less than 6 or 7%. In fact, most people will quit a challenge like this within 6 weeks. So the results were horrific. And we had to really think about a whole new question. In addition to actions speaking louder than goals and finding out that people don't know what to repeatedly do, we also found out success comes from what we repeatedly do, and people are terrible at doing things repeatedly. So I'm going to dive into that in the next video.